My name is Rebecca Mays from Philadelphia in the U.S., where I work at Temple University with Professor Leonard Swindler. He is the president and founder of the Dialogue Institute, and he asked me to help in the work as director. We are trying to make sure the legacy of his 50 years of interreligious dialogue continues, and you'll hear more about that from him. But I'd like to ask, as you listen, to think of your question or comment, make notes, and we have someone who's taking a card around. Who is that person? Okay. Yeah. Okay. What we'd like to do for Q&A is you write your question as you hear the speaker, and then we'll collect the cards when all four have finished speaking and allow them to engage with you. I'd like to introduce first Bishop, I practiced the name, Emerito Nati, good, who has been an official in the Methodist Church for several decades and has also served on the Central Committee and the Faith and Order Commission of the World Council of Churches, where he has worked hard to help produce ecumenical dialogue and positive relations. We look forward to what you have to tell us from what you've learned.
Okay. Part of my reason for joining this panel is that I chair a commission on peacemaking peacefully of the Asia Pacific Association of Methodist Educational Institutions. The theme of this conference, particularly of this panel, is right down my alley. John Wesley provides the foundation of peacemaking peacefully with his statement, "Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can." The three simple rules John Wesley asked the Methodists to follow are: do no harm, do good, stay in love with God. Methodists throughout their history have sought to obey these rules. They have become better known by the good they do rather than by the beliefs they confess. A good that they seek to do is to make peace peacefully. This is derived directly from one of the Beatitudes of Jesus. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. The reason peace has to be made peacefully is because there is a movement of enemy making in the way things are and among peoples. When Jesus said, "Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you," he was assuming an enemy-making disposition among people. It is this disposition that explodes into violence. The problem then in peacemaking peacefully is excising this enemy-making disposition and its explosion into violence. Jesus also provided the means to remove it. His prescription is the way of love and prayer. Pray for those who persecute you. A few basic things may be said about this prescription. The good is created by God and is built into His creation. God saw everything that He had made, and indeed it was very good. This means that creation as good and the good in it are prior in being and dignity over the evil that seeks to undo them. The evil that men do to one another may be turned into good by God for human benefit. Even though you intended to do harm to me, said Joseph to his brothers, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people as He is doing today. The whole life ministry in Jesus, life ministry and death of Jesus, is the making of peace by overcoming the evil that spawns violence. John sums it up. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. The vision of both Old and New Testaments and all of God's people is that of a new heaven and a new earth. In that new creation, God Himself will be with His people. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. And one sitting on the throne said, See, I am making all things new. Of course, it is not only Christianity that has a vision of peace and peacemaking peacefully. All the great traditions of faith, from the ancient age to the present, nurture a vision of peace and ways of making peace peaceful. All have elements of non-violence and non-harming. All have elements of self-discipline and self-control in body and mind. All have ideas about being human and what humanizes. All have a diagnosis of what is wrong in the nature of things. All are ways and forms of salvation. And all have suggestions as to how to achieve their vision of peace. Our forum here is designed to bring to the conference table all these resources for peace and peacemaking for mutual benefit. I want for us to know, however, that it is not only faith traditions that seek to make peace peacefully. There are also movements in secular society that aim at peace and peacemaking. I quote some portions of a book by Steven Pinker, who is a professor in Harvard. The title of the book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, a phrase authored by Abraham Lincoln. He has identified some of these processes of peacemaking, and I mention them without much comment. There's first of all the pacifying process done by central political authority, and which to bring order into the body politic by administering justice through law. As you know, that is the thesis of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. Then there is the civilizing process, the title of a book authored by Norbert Elias, a Jew who lived 1897 to 1990. In commercial exchange, supplier and customer cannot afford a hostile, belligerent relationship, but must respect and take into account the respective needs, attitudes, and behavior. To facilitate this process, there arises the need to refine behavior, exercise self-control, take each other into consideration, and develop a sense of fairness and a degree of honesty that facilitates exchange. Eventually, these two, the pacifying and civilizing processes, melded together and reinforced each other in the body politic. Then there is the humanizing process. Pinker uses the term humanitarian to describe this process because he wants to stress its impact on the decline of violence as it is applied to cruel torture, human sacrifice, witchcraft, religious violence such as punishing blasphemers, heretics, apostates, and forms of officially institutionalized killings like capital punishment. These have disappeared or neutralized because of humanitarian sensibility and activity. All this is right and good, but this change is rooted in a corresponding change in human sensibilities, arising out of the view that human nature can be changed and molded in its development by knowledge, reason, morality, law, concern for others, and a just social order. This drive to human perfection, which has of course a humanitarian input, is reason it can more properly be called a humanizing process. Its impact on the reduction of violence has been enormous, and we cannot, however, detail that here. There is a fourth historical movement that seeks to reduce violence in secular society, namely what Pinker calls the rights revolution. The outline of the chapter dealing with this issue includes the following: civil rights and the decline of lynching and racial pogroms, women's rights and the decline of rape and battering, children's rights and the decline of infanticide, spanking, child abuse, and bullying, gay rights, the decline of gay bashing, and the discriminalization of homosexuality, animal rights and the decline of cruelty to animals, and we may add here the right of creation to be and let be against the destruction of evil. The processes in secular society that we have just noted, so it seems, are moored in changes in human sensibilities. The change in human sensibilities may have a dispositional basis in the legacy of evolution, which require long stretches of evolutionary time, but also in cultural change that could happen gradually or abruptly in shorter time than real time. Again, I list some of these human sensibilities in summary form. There is the sensibility of empathy, expressed in sympathetic humanitarian actions. There is the sensibility of self-control that seeks to prescribe the human tendency to be selfish, expressed in greed, self-indulgence, the carpe diem mentality, and reacting out of temper and anger to insult, frustration, and threat. Being civilized requires some measure of self-control and self-discipline. There is moral sensibility, the drive to do what is right and to be good, and the corresponding avoidance of doing wrong and being bad. There is the sensibility of rationality and the search for truth and all that it entails in terms of thinking, knowing, evaluating, and acting. There is the sensibility to diplomacy, which seeks to negotiate and compromise. And I might add, the sensibility of imagination, of transcendence. Of transcending what already is towards what can yet be, of being open to a future that can be shaped by vision, planning, and innovation, and so of being moved to realize what can yet be by doing. It must be said at this point that it is not only the values of peacemaking peacefully in the various faith traditions that should be brought to the conference table for mutual sharing and reinforcement, but a dialogue must also take place between the legacy of the faith traditions and the values of peacemaking in secular culture for the same purpose of mutual sharing and reinforcement. Very often, these two are separated. But as we do this, it may be wise to be reminded that all of us stand in between a perennial dilemma, namely the dilemma of peacemaking peacefully and peacemaking violently. This is not just a logical dilemma. This is not just an existential dilemma. You might even call it an ontological dilemma. The dilemma is aggravated by the privatization of religious faith and its banishment from the public sphere, and then given political form by the separation of church and state. It is exacerbated by the political necessity of maintaining peace and order by police power, which is by nature violent. Today, while some forms of violence have disappeared or neutralized, new forms of more terrifying violence have appeared globally, and requiring more violence to quell them in the name of making peace. Can this dilemma be ever resolved? There are those who say good and evil are co-eternal, and the struggle between them unresolvable. There are those who say evolution may, in the long run of evolutionary time, a peaceful species may emerge, but not through abrupt cultural change and ordinary time. If these views were correct, and there are other views, I don't need to mention them, then the question arises, what then is the point of making peace peacefully? When, together with it, there is making peace violently. What other worldview might there be that would make sense of making peace peacefully, even if it were only in terms of vision and hope? Thank you.
Bishop Knockpil has opened our session very well, building a better future from social cohesion through shared values to framing a global ethic He has named key sensibilities we humans have: empathy, self-control, morality, rationality, diplomacy, and imagination. And I'm particularly compelled by his point that the religious communities and secular communities will need to work together to develop the norms that serve us all. And in that regard, he's given us a great bridge to Professor Swidler and his work on a declaration, or towards a universal declaration of a global ethic. Professor Swidler.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to reinforce what my new friend, Emerito, referred to the book by Steven Pinker, a weird kind of title, Better Angels of My, Better Nature of My Angel. It's a weird title, but the book is great. The subtitle is what it's all about: the history, get this, of the decline of human violence. Everybody take a deep sigh. Things are not getting worse, they're getting better. And it's true. Read the book. Okay. I'm torn between two things. I want to talk about dialogue, but I'm supposed to talk about a global ethic. And my colleague Jonathan is going to talk about global ethic, right? I'll talk about dialogue. All right. I talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I cut myself short. I didn't even get to use my 15 minutes. I'm going to try hard today to use them all and say it right. Dialogue, as we mentioned yesterday, Greek word dia, together or across, logos, thinking, logic. So we think together. But that's what the word means. But the way we understand the word, the term, is much broader and deeper. I think of dialogue actually as the very constituency, the very structure of the whole universe. Think, for example, on the macro level, the greatest level possible, the universe expanding at the rate of 186,000 miles a second for 13.8 billion years. That's a long way out there. And it's still going and going even faster and faster. The very structure of this universe that we know is fundamentally energy and matter. They are convertible back and forth. But if there's no dialogue, if one swallows the other, black hole, just plain nothingness. What we have is somehow a dialogue between matter and energy. That's the macro level. Go down to the micro level, subatomic. We all know, those of us in this room, I'm sure, every atom is made up of electrons and protons. And there is that dialogue between the electron and proton at the very fundamental micro level of our universe. Then we come to our humanness. Just think, we humans are a dialogue of body and soul. No soul, we're just a hunk of meat. And no body, we ain't angels, sorry. But that's what we humans are. We are a dialogue of body and soul. Then think about it further. As humans, we are a dialogue between male and female, man and woman. Just on a very basic level, no dialogue between men and women for a generation and a half. Guess what? No human beings. Then we can become human only in a dialogue between the person, the individual, and the community. Imagine a scene where a baby is born, arrangements are made for it to be kept clean and fed, but no, it doesn't hear anybody talk, no words. It will grow up, it will never even think of the possibility of words. What does a baby do up until it begins to catch on. And certain sounds mean things. It just right? Sounds like my dog. My dog is better than that. Really. So we can become human only in this dialogue all the way through. So I refer to this as the cosmic dance of dialogue. And we humans are, we are the highest level in this. We are the great dancers in the cosmic dance of dialogue. I talked yesterday about, well, in our human dialogue, there are these four major areas. I'm not going to talk about them anymore. But that's how we humans can be fully human, in a dialogic way. And it's not just talking, it is body, soul, matter, energy, the whole of it. So when we have a good dialogue like here, we say to ourselves, this was a good dialogue. It's not just something that happened in our head, it's our whole being, not just this being separate from everything else, but this being in the dialogic context of the whole universe. And for us who are theists, the dialogue between the creator and the creation, that's the full dialogue. Now, quickly, global ethic, I still have 2 minutes to go, 3 minutes. Global ethic was a notion that my friend for over 60 years, Hans Küng, who unfortunately, as I mentioned yesterday, because of his health, couldn't be at a gathering such as this. So I'll do my best to kind of foreshadow what he would say in a much better way than I. In any case, global ethic is something that when we investigate all of the different religious and ethical systems that have existed in the world that we know about, we have evidence for, and those that exist in the world today, us in this room included, we find, in fact, there are certain basic ethical principles that we all share. This is not some dream of Leonard Swidler or Hans Küng or anybody else that we should have this. No, it just is. Now, this is in a way sort of startling, and it's very important for us today because in the past, 200 years ago, 95% of the people lived on the land, made their living on the land, died on the land, and they didn't know anything except maybe where they could walk for one day and back. So 20, 25 miles and back. That was their world. Except when some odd traveler came through and told them who knows what sort of weird things, right? That's no longer today. We live in one world. Here we are, all together. And we can't avoid it. And so it is absolutely vital, literally, that we learn to know each other. And when we begin to investigate and find out what are our basic principles of how to live a good life, we find we have the same basic principles. Now, when you look at it, you can see the series of negatives, don't steal, don't lie, don't kill, murder. That's there. Very important, because if we didn't have them, we wouldn't exist. Those communities that didn't follow those rules just poof, disappeared. And we are the ones who didn't disappear. So they're there, absolutely vital. But we talk about them, and that's the global ethic, that which we in fact share. Now, I want to suggest that it's not just the negatives, don't lie, don't steal, and so on. And they're spelled out, articulated. I mean, Hans drew up one, and I drew up one, and my friend and colleague, Rebecca, and other graduate students drew up a third one. You all, I would invite, should do your own and share, because we have to think it through. You don't want to just sort of take somebody else's word for it. You want to think it through and say, yes, it makes sense, tweak it this way, tweak it that way. But what's, I think, most of all important is also we need to think of the global ethic as having positive values. Ask yourself the question, if half a dozen of us sat around and asked ourselves, well, what are the things that we think are fundamentally good? That's what ethics is about, good and evil. I think we would probably say things like, I want to have a life, a human life, in which my daughters can live in peace. I want to have a human life in which my daughters will be educated. They will be able to earn their own living in a way that is going to be reinforcing to them rather than degrading. Those kinds of positive values. I think we need to also articulate our global ethic that way, because as a matter of fact, I mean, all the Muslims, all the Hindus, all the good Marxists, atheistic Marxists that I've met in the world over my lifetime, they value those things. Those are the ethical good values for them. I would want to suggest that if we had another day, however many people there are in this room, the 40 of us, I would say, why don't we sit around and start to write what we think are the basic ethical principles, right and wrong, that I hold, and I think from everything that I've known in the way of study, meeting, and experience, that everybody else in the world will also say yes to. That's the global ethic. Now, why is it important that we sort of have this idea in our head? Well, it's going to help us to make real the fact that there are other people who have many different ideas about right and wrong in their lives, but underneath the fundamental ethical principles of right and wrong, in fact, are shared by us all. So that means that all this talk about one family under God, nice words. What's more important is that our heads and our hearts are going to understand and grasp and live those words. And we can do that when we know, because we've thought about it, we've talked with others, yes, they do hold these same basic ethical principles as we do. And that, I think, it's not a cure-all. It's a first major step in the direction of we can work together. Remember, I told you yesterday, or suggested yesterday, for me, I understand this dialogue that we all need to live, because that's what the way the whole universe is, and the dialogue between us and our Creator is the dialogue of the head. Yes, that's what we've been talking about. The dialogue of the hands, where we work together, we join hands to make this world not just a house where we live, but a home. And an important part of our being able to do that effectively is we have to then also have in our heart the third dialogue. We have to have in our heart a knowledge that we in fact share these same basic living principles of right and wrong. And then the fourth, of course, is wholeness, integrated. And as I suggested yesterday, holiness, the very word holos is the Greek origin of it in English and other Germanic languages, means to be whole, complete. Doesn't mean going around shaking a rosary or praying all the time. Those are externals helping us to be whole, complete, healed. I yield.
I so appreciate the positive human sensibilities the bishop gave us. And now, Professor Swidler, you've given us a central question that is also positive. What are the ethical principles we as a community can share? What are the values we can positively embrace? And from there, look at the differences with that strong foundation. I also appreciate that they're already there, that we're not creating commonly held shared values. They exist in our religious traditions. So religious leaders and lay leaders can work together in these small groups to see what is and apply it to action on the ground, which I know is a very central tenet of the Ramakrishna mission in Delhi, India, where Swami, and you'll have to say your last name for me, Mananda. I'll work on it. By Sunday, I'll have it. Who is in perpetual bliss. And thus, we are very lucky to be able to receive the wisdom of his work as secretary at that mission. Thank you for coming.
Let me begin with a very small peace chant. Om Asutoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, and from death to immortality. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. First of all, I'm extremely happy to be here. Thanks to our Mr. Flynn and our Gail and Rebecca and all of you. I'm so happy that Professor Spindler has kind of, given me the clue. In fact, he has very briefly towards the end of his deliberation touched the main points on which I will be focusing. Because now, as I understand, this Global Peace Foundation is largely attempting this idea of peace based on ethical frameworks, isn't it? So in that, how can we integrate religion, religious leaders and others who are not really leaders of religion, but then they are also in the society, extremely important. So in that connection, briefly, I come from an organization called Ramakrishna Mission. My name is Swami Shant Atmananda, together Shant Atmananda. It means that being eternally in bliss, as Professor Verma put it. You'll see, you can examine how it is when I behave with you probably. Now the point is, this organization was started by Swami Vivekananda more than 120 years ago. He was one of the most powerful and extremely influential representatives of the World Parliament of Religions held in Chicago in the year 1893, where for the first time from a public platform, a religious leader proclaimed the dire necessity for harmony or deep understanding between various religions. It was for the first time it was proclaimed from a platform that way. So we have been consistently last 120 years working in that direction. And then although we do a lot of humanitarian activities, huge, we have millions of students, millions of patients that are being cared by our institutions. We have more than 200 centers in mostly India and several parts of the globe. And Interfaith Dialogue is one of our very chosen and very extremely favored areas that way. Now, as our Professor Spindler also talked about, now what can be the real basis of ethics and morality? That's what I'm really trying to say today. Because religions are there, although individually most of the religions talk about extraordinary things, still somehow the chemistry doesn't seem to gel. Somewhere we are finding a gap ultimately. Because if we look at the basic tenets of all religions, they all speak of extraordinary values, extraordinary ideas. But then, why there is so much of disharmony in the name of religion also? And again, drawing up an ethical framework, etc., as again several others have also talked about, they are extremely necessary. But somewhere we must also know what can be a kind of a universal basis for such a kind of a framework. Why? Because quite often, every day so many people come and talk to us, discuss about this. You all talk about ethics, morality, and all that, but in the world we find that people who are unethical, who are immoral, they seem to be thriving, they seem to be making a lot of money, they are apparently happy and so on. These issues are being talked about. So, if you have to really draw a framework for ethics, what can be in a truly global sense, truly universal sense, which will be acceptable to everybody? Now, again, as I said, one of the foundations which was laid by Swami Vivekananda, he gave an extraordinary definition of human personality itself. He said, all the problems you see in this world today, in any sphere, not only in religion, everywhere, even within the society, even between spouses, even between man and woman, everywhere. The main reason is because we are dividing ourselves. Wherever there is a division, wherever there is this kind of a differentiation, there, some problem comes, and that is what leads to loss of peace. That's where there is violence, that's where the world seems to suffer. But Swami Vivekananda defined humanity as this way. He gave a very beautiful definition. He said, each soul is potentially divine. The goal of humanity is to manifest this divinity. And then he said that it can be done in several ways. He said it can be done either by work, by worship, by philosophy, by psychic control, by one or more or all of these. And what is the goal? Is a freedom. By doing all that, you get freedom. Actually, if you look at all of us today, if you look at ourselves, you look at the world outside, everywhere, the one idea that the entire humanity is constantly chasing is the idea of freedom. Because very soon our friend will show me only 3 minutes left. So I don't want to go deeper into this, but some other time, even outside the conference, we can talk. If you really look at your own endeavors, what all of us are constantly endeavoring is the idea of freedom in one area or other, either in terms of economics, in terms of health, or in terms of interpersonal relationship, in terms of religion, in terms of psychology, philosophy, business, everywhere. Whatever we are attempting is ultimately the idea of freedom. But as long as we keep doing it at little lower levels, in the existential levels, we seem to be chasing a mirage. We get freedom somewhere. Supposing you want to be economically more free, you put in enormous extra effort to earn more, then you lose freedom in the direction of health. So it is constantly we are chasing one freedom, we keep losing elsewhere. But why? If you look at this definition of Swami Vivekananda, he says the whole of humanity, if only we realize that we are not just this limited body-mind complex, this individual. We are beyond that, which he called as spiritual divine, in the sense that we are of an infinite dimension, enormous possibilities, enormous power, enormous glory, enormous energy. If only each one of us can try to think of ourselves that way, we'll have an extremely expanded view of ourselves. Then we'll be able to accommodate every kind of view. No one will be a stranger to us. Because the more and more you expand, more and more ideas will be acceptable to you. So probably this can be a very great foundation for drawing up an universal code of ethics. The idea that can we discover, can we accept the idea that we are extraordinary. We are not bound by the idea of this body. We are not limited by this idea of even the mind. By borders, religion, caste, creed, nationality. No borders, no boundaries that way. Yes, in our own limited way we may have certain identification. But then deep within we also know that this is just only a part of my identity. I am a much bigger than this, in the sense that I am universal, I am extraordinary, I am infinite, I am boundless. Some of these ideas, there are huge logic behind all that, because it's not just mere statement. If I'm ready to enter into a dialogue with any one of you, we can sit together, find out why we say this. If you go deeper and deeper into that, we'll understand. Because each one of us, at some point of time or other, have found that we are exceeding our limitations. For example, you have we are used to, somebody is very particular about daily routine. Every day, 8 o'clock, I just have my dinner. Come what may, I have it. But then that day you are suddenly 15 minutes left for your dinner. You are watching. Suddenly some 9/11 is being shown. Next 6 hours you are just glued to the TV, you have no idea of time, you have no idea of hunger, thirst, nothing, and everything's over. Suddenly remember that you have not had your dinner. So, in each one of us in our lives, in many ways we have experienced that we are not limited by our body. Similarly, the idea of mind also. So, I can give you any number of examples and keep you engaged for hours. The idea is, somewhere or other, all of us have felt this. Can we systematically do this approach? Find out somewhere deeper levels of our own identity. That is what really make way for a global peace, global understanding, global ethics. See, global means really global, universal. Not sitting somewhere, not drawing in some drawing room, not a limited community. So unless we learn, at least to start with, think in an extraordinary way about our own selves, our own life, our personality, our identity, it's not possible to talk about this kind of a global. So, but Swami Vivekananda says, how are we to get at this idea that we are that extraordinary? Again he says, humankind is broadly divided into 4 basic categories. The work-oriented, extremely active, in which most of us really probably come in. Extremely work-oriented, very active, 24 hours, 7 days a week probably. This category is for them the path of karma, the path of work, or karma yoga as you call. Yoga means union with the extraordinary, union with the highest. That's the idea of yoga. The yoga of karma is wonderful for them. Then he says, no, if you are deeply contemplative, you are not into much of activity. For them the path of meditation or the path of Raja Yoga, again the union with the highest through the path of meditation. Then he says the idea of bhakti, because other people are largely emotional, huge mankind, essential. They are emotional by nature. He says for them there's a path of bhakti or the bhakti yoga or union with the highest through the path of bhakti. And then finally he says it's also possible if you are given to deep idea of reasoning, logic, arguing, finding out, searching for the truth, etc. Then he says then you can say that you come in the category of Jnana Yoga or those who are given to the path of search through knowledge. So he says you adopt any method, either one of these, or you can even combine, because these paths are not absolutely watertight compartments. You can go through this, you can go through that, you can combine. The idea is again and again through all that ultimately reach that highest goal, whereby you know that you are realizing day by day, as days go by, that you are that extraordinary personality, whereby you realize your innate nature. So now, what would this really give? That's what he says, that would give you extraordinary freedom. See, the point is as long as we are completely confined to the idea that we are the body, and if the temperature here a couple of degrees this way, that way we start either shivering or we say, oh, it's so cold and hot and so on. Anything, any limitation in terms of the idea that you are the body or the mind always makes you feel constricted, feel restrained, feel bound in so many ways. So, by pursuing this path of one or the other of the yogas, what happens? You get more and more freedom. The point is, there are people who have to keep eating every 3 hours. That is one thing. But then if you really go from, that is being completely confined to the level of the body. But if you slightly elevate yourself, then you say, no, I am not going to it. There are days when you can even for 12 hours, 15 hours, 24 hours. There are people who go on for a hunger strike and a satyagraha or some great, what they do? Simply they refuse to recognize they are just the body. So, these are all very perfectly, greatly perfected sciences, these paths of yoga. Anyone can adopt all that. But basically, the framework for a global ethic or a global understanding, global peace, it has to be truly global, it has to be universal, and that can happen only on the foundation that we are not this limited individuals comprising or thinking of ourselves as body and mind, but we are beyond that. There's a deeper, innate spirituality or divinity or extraordinary dimension of our personality. The moment we recognize that, we will be able to sit and really come to an extraordinary conclusion whereby we can usher in peace, harmony and so on. Otherwise, individually religions may talk of great things, but then we find constantly we are in conflict. So this is one platform which can really take us beyond all this, because this can be the commonality for everyone, even those who do not believe in religion, and that's what can really usher in that kind of a peace that our Global Foundation is talking about. Thank you.
I'm feeling inspired by this panel that we can take hope and by going more deeply in, be able to manifest what we want to see in the world outwardly. And our next speaker is giving his soul and body to that work at the present time. Dr. Jonathan Kers teaches in the Global Ethics Institute in Tübingen, Germany, and also is the International Ethics Project Coordinator for a very interesting businessman, Carl Schlett, who would agree with our first three panelists that we have extraordinary steps we are capable of taking. And he has empowered a foundation to work on taking those steps. And Dr. Kerr is one of the leaders, and we'll hear about the steps he's taking.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'll do my best to be extraordinary. Good afternoon, everyone. A warm thank you to Jim Flynn, to Gail Hamilton, and to the Global Peace Foundation for the invitation to speak here this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, peace, as we heard yesterday, is not the absence of violence. It's something much more important than that. It's a common spirit, common ethos. People who share this world ethos, or global ethic, if we prefer, disagree with each other all the time, just like our Irish friends Barry and Alan we had on the last panel. But they don't resort easily to violence against each other, for they believe that something about the existence of other people, even far away people, is worth protecting for its own sake, even with sacrificing for it necessary. Our evolutionary heritage doesn't make this kind of spiritual generosity easy. Most of our miserable history as a species was spent in small tribal bands who were forced to compete with each other in a zero-sum game for what we would now think of as unbelievably scarce resources. Our genome bears the indelible traces of this struggle. There can have been very, very little time for the overwhelming majority of our ancestors even to consider a moral meaning to life beyond the importance of daily survival. With the gradual advent, however, of what we call, or used to call, civilization, there emerges a notion of character, a notion that what we do here in our lives on earth matters somewhere else, beyond the direct material consequences of our actions. The theologian Hans Küng, the initiator of the Global Ethical World Ethos Project, calls this disposition basic trust in life or reality, German Grundvertrauen, or Lebensvertrauen, a deep sense that our lives have moral meaning and that the stories of our lives make sense in some wider picture. Küng argues that no one, quote, no one can behave ethically, end quote, without such basic trust in life, acquired, if at all, in our earliest years from a secure base of attachment to our primary caregivers, and then reinforced by direct experiences forged in a lifelong process of education via contact with new and inspiring material provided by caring, sensitive, and intelligent teachers like the other members of this panel, and I'm sure many of you. The Global Ethic Project, or what I prefer to call the World Ethos Project in honor of its German-speaking founder, who called it the German Projekt Weltethos, began in 1990 as an attempt to achieve global peace by multiplying such inspiration and increasing access to experiences of basic trust. No global peace without peace between the religions. No peace between the religions without dialogue between the religions. No dialogue between the religions without a shared world ethos, is Küng's best-known formulation of this vision. In order for religions to want to talk to each other, however, their followers have to trust in the possibility of mutual enrichment and inspiration. Otherwise, what's the point? The world ethos is therefore, from the start and by definition, a dynamic and inarticulable feeling of trust in the as yet undiscovered frontiers of life, and trust in the overall meaning of exploring them, rather than a list of normative values, however eloquently articulated, on which we might more or less hope to agree. Not all human beings define themselves as religious or God-fearing in a traditionalist sense. A world ethos or global ethic project must also be able to speak to these people, which means me and millions like me. Drawing up a list of values and asking leaders of religious communities and other non-religious social groups to sign up to it is one approach, one which was tried in 1993 with the signing of the Declaration toward a Global Ethic at the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago, and then later with the signing of the Global Economic Ethic Manifesto at the United Nations in 2009. I personally happen to think that these were mistakes in hindsight, part of a shallow marketing strategy for a much deeper and very real idea concerning the nature of human character development. I suspect that the GPF disagree with me slightly on this, and I look forward to talking about it in the discussion here over the next couple of days. Perhaps more charitably, I could say that the Declaration toward a Global Ethic and its later economic cousin were necessary steps or experiments in a longer process that we're hoping to continue here. After nearly 25 years, however, the relative failure of such documents to penetrate the hearts and minds of the world's population would tend to suggest that a new direction or impetus for the project might in any case be in order. A convention of this magnitude, and with so many people actively engaged in grassroots peacebuilding initiatives, is a wonderful forum in which to explore new ideas on what this direction might be. To repeat, Hans Küng saw the Global Ethic Project, in German Weltethos, as connected from the beginning to an inner individual spirit or attitude to life, rather than as a consensus list of publicly accepted norms. Not without reason was the 1993 Küng drafted declaration toward a global ethic called the Declaration toward a Global Ethic, not the Global Ethic Declaration. Values like humanity, reciprocity, respect for truth, partnership between men and women, and others listed in the 1993 Declaration are, if anything, in my view, effects of an existing character rather than causes or motivators of it. Küng himself has always been extremely careful to avoid suggesting, however, that the world needs a new world religion or yet another failure-doomed monolithic ideology. A world ethos or global ethic worth the name, while actively encouraging individuals to develop their own unique and autonomous individual identities, would not and could not do so uncritically, without also coaxing all people, regardless of educational background, to train their critical gazes on themselves and their existing beliefs along the lines of what Professor Swidler laid out in the plenary session yesterday afternoon and again today. If we expect this of ourselves, then to expect anything less of others would be condescending and arrogant. While if we expect this of others without also demanding it of ourselves, then we're being unreasonable and selfish. All this, however, requires prior courage to admit to oneself in the first place, which in turn requires a basic trust in life, which liberates us from the need to know everything or be right all the time. If we have such trust, then our need to be right is different. No longer absolute and tied to the health of our own egos, but relative to the advancement of the greater cause beyond ourselves, in the higher importance of which we trust. As the saying goes, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do? Basic trust in life and something beyond oneself paradoxically makes such critical thinking so necessary for the development of any meaningful sense of ethical responsibility possible. Without it, we'll simply lie to ourselves to protect our infinitely important and therefore infinitely fragile egos. Absolutely no one is immune from such self-deception. We all practice it constantly just to get through the day. But no one said that world ethos was going to be easy to build or to maintain. But at least in our best moments, we all know, most of us hopefully, what the ideal of basic trust in life or a world ethos feels like. And Tony Devine, the GPF's education coordinator, was absolutely right yesterday when he said that such a character education consists of direct experiences rather than the rote assimilation of lists. This is no excuse for not knowing the facts of a given situation. On the contrary, it provides deeper motivation to learn them in the first place. But as the famous jazz musician Louis Armstrong replied when asked to define what jazz was, he said, if you have to ask, you'll never know. The world ethos idea is, in the same sense, its own reward. The importance of such character or basic trust cannot be reduced, as ministries of education and even foundations, perhaps like the GPF, might like to do or already risk doing. Cannot be reduced to its role in promoting economic or social development. These may indeed be pleasant side effects, and one is right to hope that such side effects may indeed result. But excessively outcome-oriented thinking is part of the problem, rather than part of the solution an organisation like the Global Peace Foundation is striving for. Just as real peace is more than the absence of violence, so too is true prosperity more than the absence of material poverty. Either character is worth having for its own sake, whatever the collateral costs or benefits, or it isn't character anymore. Perhaps this is one area in which the North Korean population might actually have something to teach their South Korean counterpart on the path to reunification. The thought that I might have both have something to teach and something to learn by talking to people of different faiths, or no stated faith, implies that I don't think everything I need can be found within my own tradition, and that I expect others to feel the same about their respective traditions, and to find the same courage as I have found to look beyond them. To expect less of others than of oneself in this regard would be to fall into a pit of, frankly, relativism. To expect more would be to lapse, wittingly or unwittingly, into fundamentalism. The world ethos idea occupies the dialogical open space or middle ground between these two unhealthy poles. The genius, in my view, of Kung's theology consists precisely in the fact that he locates this dialogical dynamism, not only dialogue with others, but first and foremost dialogue with oneself, in a process of self-critical and self-driven character development in the name of a higher goal. He locates this in all the world's major and minor religious and spiritual traditions. This literary openness, a desire to read new books and have new conversations and improve and be improved by them, all for the sake of higher ends than oneself, is a fundamental feature of what it means, or should mean or could mean, to be a Catholic or a Muslim or a Confucian or a Hindu or a humanist in the first place. In the words of the famous hadith, for example, seek knowledge even in China. How exactly our ancestors discovered and passed on this liberating and civilizing moral dimension of character after thousands of difficult generations of evolution matters less than the fact that we are now here. Most of the people in this room can claim some degree of access to a reservoir of character and basic trust, thanks to strong family relationships and contact with the human civilizational heritage via both formal and informal education. It is as if we have all climbed different ladders to be here together at the summit of human possibility. To cling to the dogmas of our own traditions and to exclude the possibility of enrichment via contact with those who have climbed other ladders to be here is to remain unhealthily attached to the ladder we have climbed up on and to deny ourselves the very thing the ladder was built for. No one can take our histories, our ladders away from us, but we're at the summit now, a summit where hopefully a warm climate of basic trust will blow in from the horizon for all 4 seasons of the year. To illustrate briefly what I mean, I'd like to ask all of you to imagine for a moment the world, the earth, the day after your own death. Who knows where she will be then? No two people in this room will have exactly the same picture of their minds, in their mind, or of where they might be. Some may expect their own consciousness to have ended completely. Others may imagine a kind of continued existence for our old selves in a new or different realm. The bigger concern, however, for our purposes, is what we think the meaning of our life was, or rather, that we think it even had a meaning. You don't need a personal God or a personal afterlife for that. Even those who believe that their own selves will come to an end may believe that their sacrifices for others who will live on, or for other beings far away who may somehow have been affected by our decisions, were worth it for their own sakes. We can and should and will always debate what the moral meaning of our lives is or might be, but the discovery that it might have a wider meaning, that not everything of value to us is necessarily destroyed by the death of our physical bodies, liberates us from the tribal survival imperatives of our ancestors and allows us to embark on the complex project of living together on a single planet, increasingly connected and threatened by technology without simply killing each other over access to resources. Basic trust in life, what Kung also calls yes to reality, loving life for its own sake, presupposes a certain willingness to sacrifice for others, to give back to life more than one has given oneself. This is, in my view, the essence of the world ethos or world ethic idea, not simply a list of morally superficial consensus principles. I'm running a little bit short of time, so I think in the interest of having a little bit of time left for discussion, I'll cut myself short there. I wanted to say a bit more about some of the applications of this, particularly in the context of this conference, to education and business, which are some of the other parallel tracks going on. But hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions, and if not, I'm available for discussion afterwards. I'm playing a role, I think, in Friday's session for those of you who are sticking around. Apologies for the rush. I wanted to get through as much as I could, and I look forward to hearing you. It's been a long day. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
In an old-fashioned way. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Yes, Valka.
So I'm having difficulty forming my question. I guess what I want to know is, do you see a commonality among ethics? And here's a global ethics. So the question definitely arises, why do we have this as a sort of people not able to move beyond the boundaries of plausibility? So is it due to divine revelation? Is it due to innate revelation? Or is it due to necessity that we all need to survive together so we cannot kill each other? So what is the reason behind this stuff? So all of these different people living in different places who never met, we have this middle level. Was it due to divine revelation to prophets, divine revelation to the part of man who was born, or was it just out of necessity? As part of the religion.
Let me comment on it. Thanks. The kind of answer you're going to get is going to assume a certain perspective that you had ahead of time. In other words, if you believe that God revealed something, well, you're going to think that way. But if you're an atheistic Marxist, that's not the idea that's going to pop into your mind. And as a university professor in a state university, I usually try to take the minimalist approach because I have to teach for all my students. I can't teach them and assume that they're going to have maybe a theist position, which I hold. Okay. I think, in fact, it's a very interesting question to have set up a sociological survey to ask people and maybe tease something out of a certain sort. Now, that's, of course, going to be from below, not from above. But that, I think, is a secondary question. The first question is, oh, wow, is that really in fact the case that there are these shared values? And I would want to suggest, perhaps in contrapuntal response to my colleague, Jonathan Kerr, that yes, experience is the foundation, and it's also worthwhile doing an analysis and an investigation and attempting to spell out, to articulate what these common ethical principles are. I think it's worthwhile for me to try to articulate what I think is ethically right and wrong. Never mind what I find somebody else doing or not. Already that's worth my doing as a human being. In addition to that, I think there is also value in learning, yes, by experience, what others think, but then to try to articulate it clearly. This is a major distinction between us and the other animals, that we have the ability to think and to be conscious and self-conscious. This is very important if we want to be as full human beings as we possibly can. And that's a big deal.
Thanks for that question. If I could agree with almost everything that Len has just said. I mean, there are two. There's the descriptive project, right? What values do we say that we have? We do a sociological survey. What values do people list as priorities? There's libraries full of research on that. I think the the Global Ethic Project, or this World Ethos Project, as I'm frequently translated, is not just a descriptive project. So there's a dilemma involved. You've got to try, if you want to build a global ethic, you've got to appeal as broadly as you can, but without collapsing into relativism and saying that everyone's values are equally valid, right? There's got to be, you've got to figure that out, the middle path. And that was sort of what I tried to sketch. I don't think, to answer your question directly, that revelation, it's not necessarily an obstacle, depending on exactly how you define what revelation is and what your relationship with the text is, which is a very delicate and complex theological question which we can talk about. But obviously there are plenty of spiritual traditions and other religious traditions that don't depend on an idea of a revealed text. And I don't personally think that the idea of a world ethos can be built on such a foundation. And that's why I think what Ben said about, yes, it's a great exercise to try to write down what you think, because it will spur you to keep thinking more. A world ethos is not, and this was my critique, I suppose, of the idea of ever trying to formulate a declaration. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a legal document and has a very useful legal function, political function, social function. But in the realm of ethics, I don't think it works in the same way. As Swami said, it's about discovering something extraordinary inside yourself. And I can try to articulate that in a document and get you to sign it. But in 10 or 20 years, it will be obsolete, or the new generation. I mean, for example, just one trivial example, in the 1993 Declaration, it's 25 years ago now, 24, there's not a single word about LGBT rights, right, for example, which at least in the Western world and many other parts of the world are now taken for granted. And I think 25 years from now, there will be things which we wouldn't have thought to include in the declaration we might write today or tomorrow, which then our children will look at and wonder why they're not there. So that's my short answer to this.
Now, no, actually, if you go to the root of what you're asking, now whether there are revelations about it, there's two aspects. The need for this kind of a global ethics, global peace, it has become a sheer necessity. The expansion, the more and more we have become connected, life is so interdependent. So it's no longer possible to live in small communities separate from each other. So as the world expands, as we embrace more and more people, so this has become an existential, dire necessity today. So the basis can come from anywhere. But to my mind, if you ask me personally, I feel the revelation, they talk about more and more transcendental things. They were not so much bothered about existential matters at all. At deeper and deeper levels, if you go through revelations, they talk about a life where they are not so much bothered by the existential issues like, the problems, etc. that we face. So maybe the origin, whatever might be, the need for these kind of initiative, because we have all become today a global community. No one can really say whether it may be Trump or Saddam Hussein or whoever it is. The point is, we are all linked to each other. There is a certain dire necessity to discover some kind of a basis where there can be a meaningful coexistence.
The issue of ethics raises the issue about valuation. Because ethics has to do with what you evaluate as right, wrong, good or bad. And that implies a criterion, a standard by which one makes a judgment, an evaluation. I agree with what has just been said about basic trust. The standard by which we may judge good or evil, right or wrong, partly depends on what we trust basically. But the problem is, what exactly is that which we trust basically? Do you think that may come out of what we call shared values? Because even when we talk about shared values, we still have to find out, investigate, or reflect on what gives rise to these values that we share, which can serve as a criterion for making evaluation about what is right or wrong. Let me ask you one thing. In all of our faith traditions, as indicated by the Swami here, that we all point to something deeper that lies underneath our thinking, our evaluating, our doing. Or on the other hand, we point to something higher than our own values that we share with one another. Those who have studied the emergence of religions and philosophies during the axial period say that there is one legacy that the axial period leaves with us, namely this capacity to transcend either in terms of depth or in terms of height or in terms of breadth. What is being mentioned earlier about being not limited by our body, by our situation in life, whatever that may limit us. Now, do you think that this pointing to something deeper or higher or wider than anything that we have been able to achieve in terms of our shared values, do you think that this has no capacity to make itself known? Not just in one way, but in a variety of ways. And that to make itself known in terms of its own light, not by our own light. Revelation means that if something is revealed, it is revealed by its own light. It's like seeing with our eyes. When you look at something with your eyes, you don't see your eyes. There is a lighting up of what it is that makes itself known. I would like us for us to think a little bit more deeply about this global ethic. Yes. There is a level of reality in which ethics doesn't apply. Because it's a matter of being, a matter of something coming to be, which is not necessarily structured by our criteria of good and evil or right or wrong.
I'm going to combine two questions. What are the biggest challenges in generating institutional support for a global ethic? For example, as another writes, is it possible to have any kind of dialogue with those who have completely abandoned all manner of civilization?
Well, I feel obliged to say something about the connection directly to business, because that's the theme of the conference, and because we've heard spoken about the power of entrepreneurship. And in our time, maybe in past times in a different context, clerical classes may have been associated with tyranny or oppression or injustice, but in this day and age, there's a feeling that there's something about business culture which is sick, or which is some kind of hyper-capitalism which has gone wrong, and how you might address that. And so actually the work of the Global Ethic Institute where I'm based is oriented towards business ethics and dialogue with the business community. Now what we've been talking about today, the idea that, or what I tried to argue, that character is worth it for its own sake, is a very esoteric, or can, if you come in the language of peace and love, sound very esoteric. It's hard, you probably won't get your foot in the door at Goldman Sachs. if you come with that language. So you've got to meet people where they're at. But if there's a part of this world ethos that we're talking about is something beyond individual self-maximization and profit, then you've got to figure out a language where you, should you try to sell the global ethic idea in a cynical way and say, well, if you behave ethically and you subscribe to this list of principles, then you can increase your profits. There's a problem with arguing in that way, but there's also a problem with arguing in the language of peace and love. So nobody's perfect, but there is, and actually the badge on my lapel is a German businessman who is very much committed to this idea and through his own personal experience with conviction that you can run a successful business believing in what you're doing for its own sake and serving your clients for its own sake. Contemporary culture is not based on that. It's an outcome-oriented culture, not just in the private sector, even in the public sector. Right? There's the idea of measurability. What's the outcome going to be? Right? And so coming with this is a slightly foreign logic, I think, to the established order of things. So it's a challenge how you do it, but I like to think it's not possible.
See, the idea is now institutions they don't stand apart as anything different. Only individuals make the institutions ultimately. And if you basically address the problem largely at the individual level, more and more transformed individuals will really see that institutions are also different. As our friend Dr. said, there are many institutions today in the world, even in the business world, who really work on such foundations, such values that they are behaving that way. And moreover, if more and more, that's what, the dialogue, collective attempt. See, the point is, there's one category called the passive group people who believe that but then they are not really ready to reach out or even share their ideas and take it forward. So that way, if a larger and larger people start believing in all that, it's possible even to make institutions change. It's not that difficult. So I don't think that we have to really only look at institutions separately. But obviously, there is a scope and they can also be made to respond differently.
I wanted to suggest that there is an additional value in our making the effort to articulate as best we can what we understand to be shared ethical values, because among other things in the process of doing that, we're going to notice not what many in the world today might think is an extreme situation, namely concerning the rights of LGBT. Probably the majority of the world numerically wouldn't even know what you're talking about. However, I think practically everybody today, if they thought about it at all, would realize that no religion, no ethical system is going to claim today that slavery is morally acceptable. And yet, until 150 years ago, practically everybody, including my great leadership, the Vatican, still said, as it says in the New Testament, slaves be subject to your masters. Well, guess what? That idea is gone. No Christian theologian, no Muslim theologian, no thinker of any sort that I know of would want to get up and say slavery is ethically okay. It's gone. Well, there are all. I suggest another issue which is about to be moving in the same direction is equality for women. The history of humankind has been subordination of women. Well, it's changing. It's changing dramatically with great resistance in many places. So, therefore, it is worth our while to constantly investigate what are our basic ethical values and what do we share and where do we differ and why. In other words, put it a different way, we need to be engaged in serious dialogue about that. And it's not an either or. I mean, making such exercises is not a cure-all. If I can use a Greek word, it's not a panacea. But if I can use another language, it's a sine qua non. It's something without which we cannot effectively operate. So it's a minimum, not a maximum. Let's do it.
Last question, given our time, concerns countries where there is no internal war. This questioner says, will you mention 5 where there is no internal war? And then asks, why is this so? I've been pondering and I'm not sure I can come up with one. But are there countries where there is no internal war? So I'll leave that for us to talk with one another about. And I'd like to close, because we are at our time, aren't we? I'd like to close making reference back to the question about is it possible to dialogue with those who seemingly have no manner of civilization about them. This is a question that comes up often in our work at the Dialogue Institute. And what we say is we need to build the quorum of people who are having the discussions like we are now having, and that it will slowly draw all of the others, especially based on the trust in life that we start with. Then, beyond that fact, we do talk about ways to deal with fear, where it resides. Because what we might judge as a lack of civilization or civilized behavior may in fact simply be a fear that needs our compassion. And so I'm very grateful to all of you for being the people who are in this conversation and the compassion you bring to it. Thank you for coming.